The Blue Jackets love to draft small, fast, highly skilled forwards, and the guy this year is Luke Misa. So today we're going to talk all about him on Locked On Blue Jackets.
You're Locked On Blue Jackets, your daily podcast on the Columbus Blue Jackets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Blue Jackets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I am, as always, your host, Jay Foster, here to give you the good, the bad, and the ugly about your favorite team and mine, the Columbus Blue Jackets. Before we get started, I want to thank everyone for making this your first listen of the day every single day. Locked On Blue Jackets is free and available on all podcast platforms, as well as over on YouTube and on SiriusXM. So we're continuing our prospect profiles. Today, we've got a brand new one for you. We're talking all about Luke Misa, who is doing some really fun things up in the OHL. So I've got Sam McGilligan, friend of the show, close personal friend also. And we're going to talk all about Misa. We're going to talk about his game, whether he could fit in with the Blue Jackets, and, some comparisons that he might have to, guys like Gavin Brindley or Luca Pinelli, for example. So that's today's show. Before we jump into that, I do want to remind everyone that today's episode is brought to you by Sleeper. Download the Sleeper app, use promo code LOCKEDONNHL to get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. See Sleeper's terms of use for details. Now, we got that out of the way. I'm just going to get right into my conversation with Sam. So when I started prepping for the draft this year, I was like, man, who am I going to get Sam McGilligan to come and talk to me about? And the answer is this year's small, fast forward that he loves. So I've got the man himself. I've got Sam McGilligan. And we're going to talk about Luke Misa today because he comes highly recommended. And I guess let's just kick things straight off, Sam. What kind of player is Luke Misa beyond small and fast?
I was going to say he's a fast one. He's a really good player in terms of just using his speed to get up the ice. He's a really good puck mover in terms of transition. He's a high effort guy as well, though. So he will go into board battles. He's a smaller guy, but he's got good body positioning. He does the things he needs to do to kind of fend off bigger players. He's not a super high-end manipulator, someone who will just use his skill and his skating to really deke a defender one way and then kind of slip into that space the other way behind them. But he makes up for it a lot in just terms of being really smart and being involved in the play a lot and just knowing, puck's got to go in the middle of the ice here. I'm going to send the puck in the middle of the ice. And just kind of you can see how habits without kind of improving the manipulation side of his game will limit what he will do in terms of raw scoring totals. But in terms of effectiveness, he's a really effective player through and through. And it's kind of easy to see a lot of these strengths coming in and doing him well in the NHL.
So he's kind of ranked anywhere from, I think, Tony Ferrari has him at 11th, and then Bob McKenzie has him at 67th.
Yeah.
Is he one of those players that if he's 3 inches taller is a universal first-round pick?
Yeah, I think so. I think that I only reason I even hesitate with it is because I'm sure there are few people out there who just don't like volume-based players like him. But even then, he's one of the best skaters in the draft, period. In terms of pure speed, I mean, his brother Michael, who's contending for first in next year's draft, is a unbelievable skater. Everybody sits there and praises his skating. It's true because Michael's skating is incredible too. But then you look at Luke, he sometimes looks a little faster out there. I don't know if I'd say he's sharper in terms of his lateral agility or anything like that. But in terms of pure get up and go speed, he's one of the fastest players in the CHL through and through. He will, and when it comes to the NHL, it stands out immediately there as well. He would be a good skater at the NHL level.
The Blue Jackets had a lot of success drafting those kind of guys that maybe aren't the biggest, but do have that high energy motor. You know, you look at Gavin Brindley for one. You look at a guy like James Malatesta for another. Does he kind of fit that same profile of smaller guy, but is just kind of the Tasmanian devil pinballing around the ice?
A little bit. I don't, not in terms of the way that Gavin Brindley was, because Brindley was that type of archetype of a player just almost perfected, I'd say. Like, I mean, I was here doing Brindley last year. I love Gavin Brindley, and go Blue Jackets for that. But I think for Misa, I think Brindley had a little bit more of an offensive upside to him. Like, I saw plays out of Gavin Brindley where I was like, you can manipulate people really well. You just don't do it because you're just trying to play the game the right way, basically. And like, you find the right moments to burst the skill out. Misa's more, he's really playing with speed and pace when he has the puck in space. And when he doesn't, he's just like passing along to someone else, get open, pass it along to someone else, get the puck into the middle of the ice, kind of just take a shot if the shot's there. He's archetypically still similar to what Columbus typically drafts. So, like, if Columbus is a team that took him, I'm not surprised.
Yeah, Columbus loves to draft for like one aspect, typically skill, and then they're like, you know what, we'll figure the rest out. So let's talk a little bit more kind of about Misa's development plan and kind of his future in the NHL. What do you see his ceiling as? Is he a bona fide top line guy? Is he a really good middle six guy? Like, where do you see him landing?
I think he's a really good middle six guy. I think that the speed is there, and the hands in some moments are just like breathtaking. That, like, if everything works out perfectly, I could see him playing in a top six role for sure. Like, he has those traits that you look for in top six guys. A lot of players in this draft don't have them. Luke Misa does. Realistically, I think he ends up being more of a middle six guy because he's still better at the whole like playing hockey and moving the puck up the ice kind of thing than to generate the final touch on a scoring chance or set up the final play or something like that. So I definitely would probably say middle six. Like, I'm definitely going to say middle six, but like a really good middle six guy. Like, it's not like a bad thing. Like, I think it was Will said it on the show on the Scouting stream where it was something like Misa can go in the third round and people will look at him in 5-6 years and see he played 200 NHL games and has 100 points or something like that and has like 40 points in his last 2 seasons. And people are like, who is this guy? And it's like, I could totally see that happening. I'm surprised that when Bob McKenzie's list came out, then he was listed at 66, which indicates that, yeah, he's likely going in that range. I was a little like, really? Because in a lot of ways, he does things that no one else in the OHL does. Okay, sure. It's the size thing. Like, it's the size thing. And sometimes, like, that size bias really does just work against players, even after they're drafted, even though the organization that takes them are aware of that. So he's a little bit more risk than other players, but once you reach the second round and onwards, it's like, what is the risk? Everybody in the second round is technically deemed risky. If they weren't, they wouldn't be there, right? There's very few times where like clear first round talents in every way, even by like not just public standards, but NHL standards fall. It's super rare that they are there early in day 2. Luke Misa maybe Luke Misa is considered this by the end of the year. Like, he could have a really good U18 tournament. He could just go on. Actually, I don't think he's eligible for the U18s. He's a 2005 born.
Yeah, he turned 18 in November.
Yeah. Okay. So I don't know. It would require, like, Mississauga could go on a bonkers playoff run led by Luke Misa, and that might elevate his draft status a bit. But I was shocked to find that, the NHL wasn't so high on him. Canadian kid, usually, like, he ticks off all the things that, like, usually players like him are not the ones who are usually that biased against, unless the only thing they care about is small. And in this case, I guess it's like the size.
In a minute, we've got more of my conversation with Sam about Luke Misa. But first, I'm going to tell you all about Sleeper, because we are well into the season now, and the Blue Jackets might not be where a lot of us expected, but regardless of where they are, I want to remind you that you can win big by playing Daily Fantasy Hockey on Sleeper, the official daily fantasy app of the Locked On NHL Network. They're our number one choice for daily fantasy hockey because you can win 100 times your cash. It just takes a couple of minutes to make your entries. They've also got NFL, NBA, MLB, college football, all kinds of things. And all you have to do is pick whether studs like McDavid, Ovechkin, Crosby, McKinnon, Matthews, Gaudreau, Voronkov will record more or less of their sleeper projections for things like goals, assists, saves, plus minus, and more in any given game. To win 100 times your money, all you need to do is correctly predict the outcome of 8 stats. That's right. You just need to get 8 questions right, and you're going to win 100 times your money. So start paying attention and nail your picks so you can start winning big. Use promo code LOCKEDONNHL, and you'll go to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. That's code LOCKEDONNHL. See Sleeper terms of use for details and locational availability. The Blue Jackets have historically had an issue with having literally any centers ever. Is Luke Misa a guy that can come into the lineup and play center, or do you think his game is kind of going to translate to the wing? Because
I think that's a winger.
Yeah, there was a lot of conversation when they drafted Kent Johnson of, he can be a center in this league. And then, sure, he can, I think. But I think his game is just so much better on the wing that you keep him there. Is that kind of what you see Misa's game as?
I think Misa is kind of better at center. So if I'm being completely honest, I do think he's a little better at center. I just don't think, knowing how the NHL works, that somebody will take him and play him in that position. To be that height and pull it off requires a lot of things to go in your favor that typically don't, especially when you're competing against a 6'2" center for the same roster spot. If you're a fast puck mover, they can put you on the wing and feel good about it. I think he's a good center, personally. I think his play is best when he's in open space and in the middle of the ice, and when he's not just leading a rush. But honestly, sometimes I think his best moments come from when he's following up. Let's say it's Porter Martone who's rushing up the ice, and he's following him up, and then he gets to come into the speed. Porter Martone kind of slows up a bit, and Misa flies through, and that massive pace change really throws people off guard. And those types of plays are going to be awesome, and he'll definitely do them in the NHL, and he'll still be able to as a winger. But I just think being able to control the center of the ice more is kind of one of his better strengths, and it's a shame that he will likely be moved to wing, but it's a move that I also I do ultimately understand why it will happen, and just kind of hope that he's the exception where it doesn't.
Is there I hate asking this question normally, but is there a player that you can kind of look at who's had success in the league and think, Misa can kind of follow that development path?
It's interesting because every time it's name your typical, there's not say typical, there's a whole bunch of them in the NHL, but who's your 5'9" middle six of the lineup, just go-getter player who gets a lot of stuff done and just moves the puck in high volumes. Those types of players, I'm blanking. I'm always bad when it comes to the NHL.
I know. I've stopped asking this question usually, but Misa's such an interesting player that
he is. Or it's just it's specifically because of his speed that makes you it indicates that you're going to be getting a crazy high upside player, because whenever someone hears 5'9" and lightning fast, they suddenly go 70 points, and it's not I don't think it's the worst thing to say. I mean, it'd be him reaching about the peak of a ceiling, but it's still not entirely unrealistic.
I know I've gone blank on every single under 5'10" forward in the NHL. Suddenly.
I almost want to search this, and we can continue, and then I will give you a better answer.
Okay, that's fine, because I do want to talk a little bit more about Bob McKenzie's rankings. In him dropping to 67 really surprised me. I assumed he would fall because he does, and obviously Bob McKenzie's rankings are not necessarily he's the 67th best prospect. Bob McKenzie's ranking is I think this is where he's going to go based on what I've heard from teams and what teams need and things like that. Which I think people sometimes get kind of mad about Mackenzie's rankings of like, this player is way better than the 12th best pick, but he's going to go 12th because that's the way the teams fall. How, like, where do you have him on your personal table, I guess? And then where do you see him going?
Well, it's crazy because for the first stretch of the year, up until not too long ago, and I mean like within the last month, Luke Misa was like in the beginning of my top 10, like around like 9 or 10. Biggest reason was always just because of the skating ability and like I'm always looking for play drivers, guys who are able to just take the puck and send it up the ice and you can rely on them to do so effectively. Like those are my favorite types of players. Most likely because they're extremely necessary. Like you kind of need guys like him. The speed, the way he kind of gets around guys, the way he sets up juking left and going right and vice versa, how he goes outside in. These are all assets that I'm really looking for in a player. And when they can do it with control and pace and they're making decisions at that pace and they never look like they have that millisecond of hesitation before doing something, I really appreciate those ones. Since then, a few other guys have kind of just wowed me a bit more with their skill. So I've kind of got them down in like the 12 to 16 territory. I think by year's end, anywhere between like 12 and 18-ish, maybe 20 at the latest, just because there's some really interesting guys in this range. But like among that tier, I'd say that starts at like 13. He's pretty much my favorite within it right now. And for where does he go in the real draft? I'm going to be optimistic and say early second still, because some team will see the OHL kid who is just burning people left, right, and center with his speed and go, yeah, okay, we can absolutely work with that. Why wouldn't we? But all it takes is like the 5 or 6 teams who think like that to then have one other guy ahead of them, and suddenly the rest of the teams just don't care. They don't want the smaller player. They don't think he's worth the risk, whatever their reasoning is behind it. Maybe they end up going in the 3rd round. I can't see him slipping out of that. But like, if you would have asked me last year, like, where does William Whitelaw go? I was like, I mean, 3rd round's a little crazy. I don't think he goes in the 3rd. He probably goes in the 2nd. But hey, he didn't.
Yep. Yeah, it feels like the Blue Jackets a lot of time do benefit off of other teams having the players that they like lower. So like Gavin Brindley, I don't think anyone expected him to be there still at, was it 34th? I think they grabbed him at.
Yeah, something like unbelievably dumb like that.
And hey, there he was. So they were like, well, thank you very much. We'll go ahead and take him. So I could see the same kind of thing happening with Misa. Yeah. In terms of the Blue Jackets prospect pool, kind of where do you see Misa fitting? So if they go ahead, they take Misa at whatever, if they have a second first round pick, or if they take him early in the second, where do you see him kind of slotting into the depth chart for the Blue Jackets?
Well, I'm going to open up who you guys have really quickly to make sure I have the whole system in front of me. But off the top of my head, you have Pinelli, Dumais, Brindley. We're not going to count Fantilli, I imagine, for obvious reasons.
It's weird to think that he's still, like, technically, I think, a prospect.
Yep, he is by technical definition, but he shouldn't be. Which seems
incorrect, but
yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, are we counting Jiricek, Gent, Johnson, and all them still? Is Cole Sillinger being counted?
No.
Okay, good. At this point, I didn't think he should be, but
I think anyone that's played less than 50 games.
I think you could legitimately put him in at like the 5th or 6th guy, unless there's someone I'm missing. Like the clear standouts are Brindley, Jiricek, Johnson, not in that order, but just those 3 stand out as like the clear top 3. A lot of people will say Denton Matejchuk next. I might not even disagree with them. Svozil, Whitelaw, those guys. Like if you start wherever you're placing Luca Pinelli is probably where you're placing Misa.
Okay.
They go pretty hand in hand with one another. I would say I like Misa more, because I think Misa has more projectability in his game. So I would probably say wherever you have Pinelli, bump him down one slot Misa in there.
I'm going to finish up my conversation with Sam about Luke Misa in just a second, but first I will tell you about Camino Consulting. You've heard of their online families and couples courses. You've taken advantage of the Locked On 25% discount, which is still running to the end of the month, but what about the live seminars? In both sport and business, the challenge of differentiating candidates and recruits is an endless battle. Everyone can demonstrate their measurables, their qualifications, but we all know it's the intangibles that matter when everything else is similar. Contact Camino Consulting for their team and management seminars to get a peek behind the curtain and watch your next recruiting class or hiring group become one of the most effective you've ever seen, both because you identified the right candidates and because you've learned how to communicate and motivate them in accord with their own preferences. But if you aren't in business or working with a team, that doesn't matter. Camino Consulting pays referrals. Make some money making your workplace and favorite teams better. Every group works together better at the end of year one than week one. So go ahead and contact Camino Consulting at caminoconsulting.ca and get on the fast track to understanding. Yeah, I have liked watching Pinelli a lot since getting.
I like Pinelli too.
So
he's been awesome in the suit too.
That feels like a really solid place for a prospect to land. If you're like, oh, okay, he's a little bit better than Luca Pinelli, I'd be like, okay, dope, happy about that.
Yeah, like I don't know if the only other one who'd like kind of the wild card is just how much do you believe in Jordan Dumais? Like I imagine if you're a Columbus fan listening to this, you are on the optimistic side, which like I mean I would be too if I had a prospect who was 47 points in 21 games right now. So like I would probably be thinking the same thing. I still am like real hesitant with Jordan Dumais. Whenever I watch him, I'm like, there's so much good, but there's so many things that happen in this league that just won't happen in the NHL that I don't know how to evaluate the good. But
yeah, I've decided that with Dumais, I'm going to wait and see his rookie season with the AHL before I really make a decision one way or the other.
Yeah, I mean, I thought
for
if you guys want optimism, I'm still hesitant when I watch Joshua Wall with the Canadians, but when he went from the QMJHL to the AHL and I watched him, I was like, oh, actually, he's doing better than I thought. So then I went and thought about Dumais, and I was like, maybe
out of Dumais, like that feels like I would be.
Yeah, that's still like a good spot. Like I feel like that's pretty good value for it. So yeah, somewhere in that Pinelli, Dumais, Whitelaw range. I don't know if I would actually put Whitelaw next, but yeah, somewhere in that range. Definitely like someone that moves into that like top grouping and would be mentioned. You know, when like an article comes out and they're like the 6 notable prospects from this prospect pool, we ranked 4th in the league, and like he'd be one of the names listed on the bottom, or he at least should.
Yeah. I would be okay with that. Let's kind of finish off, unless you thought of a 5'9" speedy.
Oh wait, so there's guys. Okay, I did get the list open. A lot of them are the high scoring players. So you got like the Marchands, the DeBrincats, the Caulfields. Matt Zuccarello's always been like a hustle kind of guy, but he's also been a crazy upside player. Bobby Brink maybe is someone who's like recent. Like when I'm looking at this list, like there's Yanni Gordon, names like this. They don't really do it for me. Nils Hoglander, who's a really good, like if you want to just think of a young player who's kind of comparable, but Misa's faster.
Yeah.
Hoglander's more pesty. Misa's also pesty, but like Hoglander's more pesty, but like Misa's faster. It's difficult because like when I'm looking at this list, and I actually can't believe I'm saying this, he's a better skater than most of the people on this list.
Hey,
or he's on par skating wise with quite a few of the better names on this list. There's a few who are still superior, but like, he's got feet. It is undeniable that this dude has feet and they move well.
Let's finish up here with I've been asking all of the prospect guys that come on the show the same question, and I've had I think 4 different answers so far. Blue Jackets currently sitting with the 4th best odds to draft Celebrini. So if they end up drafting 4th overall, and they, the GM of the Blue Jackets gives you a call and is like, all right, we've got the 4th overall pick. Who should we draft? Who are you taking at 4th?
Ivan Demidov. Without question. 0 thought put into it. 0, like, without question.
Is that assuming that other players are off the board, or is that just...
No.
You like him over Lindstrom?
Oh, without question.
Interesting.
Like a tier. I love Lindstrom too. That's not a slight on Lindstrom. I can't even speak, man. Like Demidov is one of those like game breakers. There's risk. It's not super safe, but when I watch him, like feel like all the scouting I've ever done sometimes when I'm watching Demidov is led up to this moment where it's like I'm watching him like this is what a Art Ross contender looks like, right? Like, is this not what they look like when they're playing? Like, do they not have to have all of this stuff? It makes like when I watch him and I go watch the other like high upside guys in the draft, I'm like, come on, like you're all good, don't get me wrong, but like this just makes me go back to Demidov and I'm like, you were a cheat code. Holy, he's insane. Like he is. Wow. There's a lot of universes where like he's a top 5 to 10ish players in this draft and a redraft, or like one of the best, at least highlight reel players in this draft. But there's a few out there where he's like Hockey Hall of Fame, like multiple 100-point seasons, and the type of play style that even when you're smaller, like it works in the playoffs because he's just such an aggressive attacker, but loves to attack players on angles that like kind of take their momentum away from them. That it's just insane. And he's got just some of the dumbest set of hands you've ever seen. Like it's Ivan Demidov. Berkeley Catton, a shout out as like the other one, but it's Ivan Demidov.
Yeah, he again, just to kind of go back to what we were talking about like at the very beginning of the episode, like Blue Jackets love to draft for skill and then figure everything else out, and Demidov feels like feels like an extremely... it's going to be interesting, obviously, because they don't have Kakalainen in charge anymore, so I don't know what the draft is going to look like, if it looks any different, but Demidov feels like an extremely...
He's like a Columbus-style player, yeah. Like... If you guys took Kent Johnson 5th, you'd take Demidov like 2nd. I feel like it's so hard to picture. He just does things that no one else does. If you have to summarize it that way, it's just that like he just does things that no one else does.
So if people want to maybe learn more about Misa or more about Demidov, like where can they find you and your work online?
Well, you can find me on Twitter, as always, at Sam_McGilligan. You can also find, whenever I write anything about rankings or something like that, at sammcgilligan.substack.com. As of this year, I am on the Scouching Show once a week, every Monday. So if you ever want to hear me and Scouch talk really dumbly, and by dumbly I mean intelligently, about players and prospects and all that stuff, every Monday night we're streaming there. And both of us work at Puck Preps as well. And if you're looking for anything to do with North American players, specifically between the age they go into the CHL draft to the age they're in the NHL draft, that's the place to go. That's the only one out there that has like great content from all their scouts on every age group. Like I'm doing 2006s, and there's other people working on the 2009s.
And that's all I've got for today. Tomorrow we're going to look at the game against the Rangers. Last one in the season series, back-to-back games against the Rangers. So we're going to take a look at that and see how the Blue Jackets have done in the month of February so far. So that's tomorrow's episode. Thank you for listening to this episode, for making us your first listen of the day every single day. Locked On Blue Jackets is free and available on all podcast platforms. We're over on YouTube and on SiriusXM. I've been Jay Foster. You can find me on Twitter at _Jacob Foster, JAKOBFORSTER. You can find the show at LO_Blue Jacket. If you have comments, questions, criticisms, email me at lockedonbluejackets@gmail.com. If you haven't subscribed to the YouTube channel yet, please feel free to do so. There's going to be a giveaway for people who are subscribed to the YouTube channel. So make sure you get on that. That's going to be coming probably at the end of next week. Fingers crossed, or the end of this week. Sorry, it sure is Tuesday already. Wow. End of this week, hopefully the giveaway will be up and running. And thank you once again for listening. Until tomorrow, make sure you stay locked on.